Over the exit of the Arcane landing field, crudely carved as though a war instrument, there was an inscription that Muad'Dib was to repeat many times. He saw it that first night on Arrakis, having been brought to the ducal command post to participate in his father's first full staff conference. The words of the inscription were a plea to those leaving Arrakis, but they fell with dark import on the eyes of a boy who had just escaped a close brush with death. They said, "O you who know what we suffer here, do not forget us in your prayers." From Manual of Muad'Dib by the Princess Rohan. The whole theory of warfare is a calculated risk. The Duke said. But when it comes to risking your own family, the element of calculation gets submerged in other things. He knew he wasn't holding in his anger as well as he should, and he turned, strode down the length of the long table and back. The Duke and Paul were alone in the conference room at the landing field. It was an empty-sounding room, furnished only with the long table, old-fashioned three-legged chairs around it, and a map board and projector at one end. Paul sat at the table near the map board. He had told his father the experience with the Hunter Seeker and given the reports that a traitor threatened him. The Duke stopped across from Paul, pounded the table. Howat told me that house was secure. Paul spoke hesitantly. I was angry too, at first, and I blamed Howat. But the threat came from outside the house. It was simple, clever, and direct, and it would have succeeded were it not for the training given me by you and many others, including Howat. Are you defending him? The Duke demanded. Yes. He's getting old. That's it. He's wise with much experience, Paul said. How many of Howat's mistakes can you recall? I should be the one defending him, the Duke said. Not you. Paul smiled. Leo sat down at the head of the table, put a hand over his son's. You've matured lately, son. He lifted his hand. It gladdens me. He matched his son's smile. Howat will punish himself. He'll direct more anger against himself over this than both of us together could pour on him. Paul glanced toward the darkened windows beyond the map board. Looked at the night's blackness. Room lights reflected from a balcony railing out there. He saw movement and recognized the shape of a guard in Atreides' uniform. Paul looked back at the white wall behind his father, then down to the shiny surface on the table, seeing his own hands clenched into fists there. The door opposite the Duke banged open. Luther Howard strode through it, looking older and more leathery than ever. He paced down the length of the table, stopped at attention facing Leo. "My lord," he said, speaking to a point over Leo's head, "I have just somehow learned how I failed you. It becomes necessary that I tender my resignation." "Oh, sit down and stop acting the fool," the Duke said. He waved to the chair across from Paul. "If you made a mistake, it was an overestimate. It was in overestimating the Harkonnens. Their simple minds came up with a simple trick. We didn't count on simple tricks, and my son is at great pains to point out to me that he came through this largely because of your training. You didn't fail there." He tapped the back of the empty chair. "Sit down, I say." Howard sank into the chair. "But I'll hear no more of it," the Duke said. "The incident is past. We have more pressing business. Where are the others?" "I asked them to wait outside while I call them in." Howard looked into Leo's eyes. "Sir, I know who my true friends are, Luther," the Duke said. Call in the men." Howard swallowed. "At once, my lord." He swiveled in the chair, called to the open door. "Gurney, bring them in." Howard led the file of men into the room. The staff officers, looking grimly serious, followed by the younger aides and specialists, an air of eagerness among them. Brief scuffling sounds echoed around the room as the men took seats. A faint smell of rat-like stimulant wafted down the table. "There is coffee for those who want it," the Duke said. He looked over his men, thinking, "They're a good crew. Man could do far worse for this kind of war." He waited while coffee was brought in from the adjoining room and served, knowing the tiredness in some of their faces. Presently, he put on his mask of quiet efficiency, stood up, and commanded their attention with a knuckle rap against the table. "Well, gentlemen," he said, "our civilization appears to have fallen so deeply into the habit of invasion that we cannot even obey a simple order of the Imperium without the old ways cropping up." Dry chuckles sounded around the table. Paul realized that his father had the precisely correct thing in precisely the correct tone to lift the mood here. Even the hint of fatigue in his voice was right. "I think first we'd better learn if Thufir has anything to add to his report on the Fremen," the Duke said. "Thufir?" Hal glanced up. "I've some economic matters to go into after my general report, sire. But I can say now that the Fremen appear more and more to be the allies we need. They're waiting now to see if they can trust us. But they appear to be dealing openly. They've sent us a gift. Still suits of their own manufacture. Maps of certain desert areas surrounding strong points the Harkonnens left behind." He glanced down at the table. "Their intelligence reports have proved completely reliable and have helped us considerably in our dealings with the Judge of the Change. They've also sent some incidental things: jewelry for the Lady Jessica, spice liquor, candy, medicinals. My men are processing the lot right now. There appears to be no trickery. You like these people, Thooper? Asked the man down the table. Howard turned to face his questioner. Duncan Idaho says that it would be admired. Paul glanced at his father, back to Howard, ventured a question. Have you any new information on how many Fremen there are? Howard looked at Paul. From food processing and other evidence, Idaho estimates the cave complex he visited consisted of some 10,000 people, all told. Their leader said he rolled a siege of 2,000 hearts. We've reason to believe there are a great many such siege communities. All seem to give their allegiance to someone called Liet. That's something new. Leo said, It could be an error on my part, sire. There are things to suggest this Liet may be a local deity. Another man down the table cleared his throat and asked, Is it certain they deal with smugglers? A smuggler caravan left the siege while Idaho was there, carrying a heavy load of spice. They used pack beasts and indicated they faced an 18-day journey. It appears, the Duke said, that the smugglers have redoubled their operations during this period of unrest. This deserves some careful thought. We shouldn't worry too much about unlicensed frigates working off our planet. It's always done. But to have them completely outside our observation, that's not good. You have a plan, sire? Howard asked. The Duke looked at Halleck. Your name? I want you to head a delegation, an embassy, if you will, to contact these romantic businessmen. Tell them I'll ignore their operations as long as they give me a ducal tithe. Howard here estimates that graft and extra fighting men heretofore required in their operations have been costing them 4 times that amount. What if the Emperor gets wind of this? Halleck asked. He's very jealous of his Trome prophets, my lord. Leto smiled. We'll bank the entire tithe openly in the name of the Fourth and deduct it legally from our levy support costs. Let our cons fight that. And we'll be running a few more of the locals who grew under the Harkonnen system. No more graft. A grin twisted Hawk's face. Ah, my lord. A beautiful low blow. Would that I could see the Baron's face when he learns of this. The Duke turned to Howard. Luther, Did you get those account books you said you could buy? Yes, my lord. They are being examined in detail even now. I've skimmed them, though, and can give a first approximation. Give it then. The Archons took 10 billion solars out of here every 330 standard days. A myriad gasp ran around the table. Even the younger aides, who had been betraying some boredom, sat up straighter and exchanged wide-eyed looks. Halleck murmured, "For they shall suck of the abundance of the seas and of the treasure hid in the sand." You see, gentlemen, Plato said, is there anyone here so naive he believes the Archons have quietly packed up and walked away from all this merely because the Emperor ordered it? There was a general shaking of heads, murmurous agreement. We'll have to take it at the point of the sword, Leo said. He turned to Howat. This would be a good point to report on equipment. How many sandcrawlers, harvesters, spice factories, and supporting equipment have they left us? A full complement, as it says in the Imperial inventory audited by the judge of the Change Lord. Howat said. He gestured for an aide to pass him a folder, opened the folder on the table in front of him. They neglect to mention that less than half the crawlers are operable, that only about a third have carryalls to fly them to spice sands, that everything Archons left us is ready to break down and fall apart. We'll be lucky to get half the equipment into operation, and luckier yet if a fourth of it is still working 6 months from now. Pretty much what we expected, Leo said. What's the firm estimate on basic equipment? Howat glanced at his folder. About 930 harvester factories that can be sent out in a few days. About 6,250 ornithopters for survey, skying, and weather observation. Carryalls a little under 1,000. Halleck said, "Wouldn't it be cheaper to reopen negotiations with the Guild for permission to orbit a frigate as a weather satellite?" The Duke looked at Howat. Knowing you there, eh, Uther? Let's pursue other avenues for now. Howat said, "The Guild agent wasn't really negotiating with us. He was merely making it plain. One mentat to another. That the price was out of our reach and would remain so no matter how long a reach we develop. Our task is to find out why before we approach him again." One of Halleck's aides down the table, swelled in his chair, snapped, "There's no justice in this." "Justice?" The Duke looked at the man. Who asked for justice? We make our own justice. We make it here on Arrakis. Win or die. Do you regret casting your lot with us, sir? The man stared at the Duke, then, No, sire. You couldn't turn, and I couldn't do naught but follow you. Forgive the outburst, but... He shrugged. We must all feel better at times. Baroness, I understand, the Duke said. But let us not rail about justice as long as we have arms and the freedom to use them. Do any of the rest you harbor Baroness? If so, lay it out. This is a friendly council where any man may speak his mind. Halleck stirred, said, I think what rankles, sire, is that we had no volunteers from the other great houses. They address you as Leto the Just and promise eternal friendship, but only as long as it doesn't cost them anything. They don't know yet who's going to win this exchange, the Duke said. Most of the houses have grown fat by new risks. One cannot truly blame them for this. One can only despise them. He looked at Howard. We were discussing equipment. Would you care to project a few examples to familiarize the men with this machinery? Howard nodded, gestured to an aide at the projector. A Solido tri-D projection appeared on the table's surface about a third of the way down from the Duke. Some of the men farther along the table stood up to get a better look at it. Paul leaned forward, staring at the machine. Scaled against the tiny projected human figures around it, the thing was about 120 meters long and about 40 meters wide. It was basically a long, bug-like body, moving on independent sets of wide tracks. This is a harvester factory, Howard said. We chose one in good repair for this projection. There's one dragline outfit that came in with the first team of Imperial ecologists, though. And it's still running, although I don't know how or why. If that's the one they call Old Maria, it belongs in a museum, an aide said. I think the Harkonnens kept it as a punishment job, a threat hanging over the workers' heads. Be good or you'll be assigned to Old Maria. Chuckles sounded around the table. Paul held himself apart from the humor. His attention focused on the projection and the question that filled his mind. He pointed to the image on the table, said, Duthor, are there sandworms big enough to swallow that whole? Quick silence settled on the table. The Duke curled under his breath. The Duke cursed under his breath, then thought, no. They have to face the realities here. There are worms in the deep desert could take this entire factory in one gulp, Howard said. Up here close to the shield wall, where most of the spicing's done, there are plenty of worms that could cripple this factory and devour it at their leisure. Why don't we shield them? Paul asked. According to Idaho's report, Howard said, shields are dangerous in the desert. A body-sized shield will kill every worm for hundreds of meters around. It appears to drive them into a killing frenzy. With the Fremen word on this, and no reason to doubt, Idaho saw no evidence of shield equipment at the Seitch. None at all? Paul asked. It'd be pretty hard to conceal that kind of thing among several thousand people, Howard said. Idaho had free access to every part of the Seitch. He saw no shields or any indication of their use. It's a puzzle, the Duke said. The Harkonnens certainly used plenty of shields here, Howard said. They had repaired depots in every garrison village. And their accounts show a heavy expenditure for shield replacements and parts. Could the Fremen have a way of nullifying shields? Paul asked. It doesn't seem likely, Howard said. It's theoretically possible, of course. A Shire-sized static countercharge is supposed to do the trick. But no one's ever been able to put it to the test. We'd have heard about it before now, Halleck said. The smugglers have close contact with the Fremen and will have acquired such a device if it were available. And they'd have no inhibitions against marketing it off the planet. I don't like an unanswered question of this importance, Leo said. Duther, I want you to give top priority to solution of this problem. We're already working on it, my lord. He cleared his throat. Idaho did say one thing. He said you couldn't mistake the Fremen attitude towards shields. He said they were mostly amused by them. The Duke frowned then. The subject under discussion is spicing equipment. Howard gestured to his aide at the projector. The Slido image of the harvester factory was replaced by a projection of a winged device that dwarfed the images of human figures around it. This is a carryall. Howard said. It's essentially a large thopter whose sole functions is to deliver a factory to spice-rich sands. Then to rescue the factory when a sandworm appears. They always appear. Harvesting the spice is a process of getting in and getting out with as much as possible. Admirably suited to our current morality, the Duke said. Laughter was abrupt and too loud. An ornithopter replaced the carryall in the projection focus. These thopters are fairly conventional, Howard said. Major modifications give them extended range. Extra care has been used in sealing essential areas against sand and dust. Only about 1 in 30 is shielded, possibly discarding the shield generator's weight for greater range. I don't like this de-emphasis on shields, the Duke muttered. And he thought, is this the Harkonnen's secret? Does it mean we won't even be able to escape unshielded frigates if all goes against us? He shook his head sharply to drive out such thoughts, said, let's get to working estimate. Lower profit figure B. Howard turned 2 pages in his notebook. After assessing the repairs and operable equipment, we've worked out a first estimate on operating costs. It's based naturally on a depreciated figure or a clear safety margin. He closed his eyes in Mentat's semi-trance. Said, under Harkonnens, maintenance and salaries were held to 14%. We'll be lucky to make it at 30% at first. With reinvestment and growth factors accounted for, including the CHOAM percentage and military costs, our profit margin will be reduced to a very narrow 6 or 7% until we can replace worn-out equipment. We then should be able to boost it up to 12 or 15% where it belongs. He opened his eyes. Unless my lord wishes to adopt Harkonnen methods. We're working for a solid and permanent planetary base, the Duke said. We have to keep a large percentage of the people happy, especially the Fremen. Most especially the Fremen, Howard agreed. Our supremacy on Caladan, the Duke said, depended on sea and air power. Here we must develop something I choose to call desert power. This may include air power, but it's possible it may not. I call your attention to the lack of thopter shields. He shook his head. The Harkonnens relied on turnover from off-planet for some of their key personnel. We don't dare. Each new lot would have its quota of provocateurs. Then we'll have to be content with far less profit and a reduced harvest, Howard said. Our output the first 2 seasons should be down a third from our current average. There it is, the Duke said. Exactly as we expected. We'll have to move fast with the Fremen. I'd like 5 full battalions of Fremen troops before the first CHOAM audit. That's not much time, sir. Sire. Howard said. We don't have much time, as you well know. They'll be here with Sarkar disguised as Harkonnens at the first opportunity. How many do you think they'll ship in, Thufir? 4 or 5 battalions all told, sire. No more. Guild troop transport costs being what they are. Then 5 battalions of Fremen plus our own forces might do it. Just how to do it. Let us have a few captive Sardaukar to parade in front of the Landsraad Council, and matters will be much different. Profits or no profits. We'll do our best, sire. Paul looked at his father, back to Howat, suddenly conscious of the Mentat's great age, aware that the old man had served 3 generations of Atreides. Aged. It shows in the rheumy shine of the brown eyes, in the cheeks cracked and burned by exotic weathers, in the rounded curve of the shoulders, in the thin set of his lips with a cranberry-colored stain of sappho juice. So much depends on one aged man, Paul thought. We're presently in a war of assassins, the Duke said. But it has not achieved full scale. Thufir, what's the condition of the Harkonnen machine here? We've eliminated 259 of their key people, my lord. No more than 3 Harkonnen cells remain. Perhaps 100 people in all. These Harkonnen creatures you eliminated, the Duke said. Were they propertied? Most were well situated, my lord. In the entrepreneur class. I want you to forge certificates of allegiance over the signatures of each of them, the Duke said. File copies with the judge of the change. We'll take legal position that they stayed under false allegiance. Confiscate their property, take everything, turn out their families, strip them. Make sure the crown gets its 10%. It must be entirely legal. Thufir smiled, revealing red-stained teeth beneath the carmine lips. A move worthy of your grandsire, my lord. It shames me I didn't think of it first. Howat frowned across the table, noticing a deep scowl on Paul's face. The others were smiling and nodded. It's wrong, Paul thought. This will only make the others fight all the harder. They've numbed the game by surrendering. He knew the actual Knowles Bard convention that ruled in Canley. But this was the sort of move that could destroy them, even as it gave them victory. I have been a stranger in a strange land, Hawk quoted. Paul stared at him, recognizing the quotation from the OC Bible, wondering, does Gurney too wish an end to devious plots? The Duke glanced at the darkness out of the windows, looked back at Halleck. Gurney, How many of those sand workers did you persuade to stay with us? 286 in all, sire. I think we should take them and consider ourselves lucky. They're all in useful categories. No more? The Duke pursed his lips then. Well, pass the word along to a disturbance at the door interrupted him. Duncan Idaho came through the guard there, hurried down the length of the table, and bent over the Duke's ear. Leto waved him back, said, "Speak out, Duncan. You can use this in strategy staff." You can see this is strategy staff. Paul studied Idaho, marking the feline movements, the swiftness of reflex that made him such a difficult weapon teacher to emulate. Idaho's dark round face turned toward Paul, the cave-sitter eyes giving no hint of recognition, but Paul recognized the mask of serenity over excitement. Idaho looked down at the length of the table. "We've taken a force of Harkonnen mercenaries disguised as Fremen. The Fremen themselves sent us a courier to warn us of the false band. In the attack, however, we found the Harkonnens had waylaid the Fremen courier, badly wounded him. We were bringing him here for treatment by our medics when he died. I'd seen how badly off the man was and stopped to do what I could. I surprised him in an attempt to throw something away." Idaho glanced down at Leto. "A knife, my lord. A knife of what ain't the like of what that you've never seen." "Chris knife?" someone asked. "No doubt of it," Idaho said, "milky white and glowing with the light of its own like." He reached into his tunic, brought a sheath with a black-ridged handle protruding from it. "Keep that blade in its sheath." The voice came from the open door at the end of the room, a vibrant and penetrating voice that brought them all up staring. A tall, robed figure stood in the door, barred by the crossed swords of the guard. A light tan robe completely enveloped the man, except for a gap in the hood and black veil that exposed eyes of toll blue, no white in them at all. "Let him enter," Idaho whispered. "Pass that man," Duke said. The guards hesitated, then lowered their swords. The man swept into the room and stood across from the Duke. "This is Stilgar, chief of the Seitch I visited. Leader of those who warned us of the false band," Idaho said. "Welcome, sir," Leo said. "And why shouldn't we unsheath this blade?" Stilgar glanced at Idaho. "You observe the customs of cleanliness and honor among us. I would permit you to see the blade of the man you befriended." His gaze swept the others in the room, but I do not know these others. "Would you have them defile an honorable weapon?" "I am the Duke Leto," the Duke said. "Would you permit me to see this blade?" "I'll permit you to earn the right to unsheath it," Stilgar said. And as a mutter of protest sounded around the table, He raised a thin, darkly veined hand. I remind you, this is the blade of one who befriended you. In the weighing silence, Paul studied the man, sensed the aura of power that radiated from him. He was a leader, a Fremen leader. A man near the center of the table across from Paul muttered, "Who's he to tell us what rights we have on Arrakis?" It is said the Duke Leto Atreides rules with the consent of the governed. The Fremen said, "Thus I must tell you the way it is with us. A certain responsibility falls on those who have seen a crysknife." He passed a dark glance across Idaho. "They are ours. They may never leave Arrakis without our consent." Halleck and several of the others started to rise, angry expressions on their faces. Halleck said, "The Duke Leo determines whether..." "One moment, please," Leo said. The very mildness of his voice held them. This was not get out of hand, he thought. He addressed himself to the Fremen. "Sir, I honor and respect the personal dignity of any man who respects my dignity. I am indeed indebted to you, and I always pay my debts. If it is your custom that this knife remain sheathed here, then it is so ordered by me. If there is any other way we may honor the man who died in our service, you have but to name it." The Fremen stared at the Duke, then slowly pulled aside his veil, revealing a thin nose and full-lipped mouth in the glistening black beard. Deliberately, he bent over the end of the table, spat on its polished surface. As the men surrounding around the table started to surge to their feet, Idaho's voice boomed across the room. "Hold!" Into the sudden charged stillness, Idaho said, "We thank you, Stilgar, for the gift of your body's moisture. We accept it in the spirit with which it is given." And Idaho spat on the table in front of the Duke. Aside to the Duke, he said, "Remember how precious water is here, sire. That was a token of respect." Leo sank back into his own chair, caught Paul's eye, a rueful grin on his son's face, sensed the slow relaxation of tension around the table as understanding came to his men. The Fremen looked at Idaho, said, "You measured well, my Seitch, Duncan Idaho. Is there a bond on your allegiance to your Duke?" "He is asking me to enlist with him, sire," Idaho said. "Would he accept the dual allegiance?" Leo said, "You wish me to go with them, sire?" "I wish you to make your own decision in the matter," Leo said. And he could not keep the urgency out of his voice. Idaho studied the Fremen. "Would you have me under these conditions, Stilgar?" "There'd be times when I'd have to return to serve my Duke. You fight well, and you did your best for our friend," Stilgar said. He looked at Leo. "Let it be thus. The man Idaho keeps the crysknife he holds as a mark of his allegiance to us. He must be cleansed, of course, and the rites observed. But this can be done. He will be Fremen and soldier of the Atreides. There is a precedent for this. Leia serves masters. Duncan? Leo asked. I understand, sire, Idaho said. It is agreed, then. Your water is ours, Duncan Idaho, Stilgar said. The body of our friend remains with your duke. His water is Atreides' water. It is a bond between us. Leo sighed, glanced at Howat, catching the old mentat's eye. Howat nodded, his expression pleased. I will wait below, Stilgar said, while Idaho makes farewell with his friends. Turok was the name of our dead friend. Remember that when it comes time to release his spirit. You are friends of Turok. Stilgar started to turn away. Will you not stay a while? Leo asked. The Fremen turned back, whipping his veil into place with a casual gesture, adjusting something beneath it. Paul glimpsed what looked like a thin tube before the veil settled into place. Is there a reason to stay? The Fremen asked. We would honor you, the Duke said. Honor requires that I be elsewhere soon. The Fremen said. He shot another glance at Idaho, whirled, and strode past the door guards. If the other Fremen match him, we'll serve each other well, Leo said. Idaho spoke in a dry voice. He's a fair simple, sire. You understand what you're to do, Duncan? I'm your ambassador to the Fremen, sire. Much depends on you, Duncan. We're going to need at least 5 battalions of those people before the Sardaukar descend on us. It is going to take some doing, sire. The Fremen are a pretty independent bunch. Idaho hesitated then. And, sire, there is one other thing. One of the mercenaries we knocked over was trying to get this blade from our dead Fremen friend. The mercenary says there is our Kun reward of 1,000,000 Solars for anyone who will bring in a single crysknife. Leo's chin came up in a movement of obvious surprise. Why do they want one of those blades so badly? The knife is ground from a sandworm's tooth. It's a mark of the Fremen, sire. Would a blue-eyed man could penetrate any siege in the ancient land. They'd question me unless I were known. I don't look Fremen, but Pyre de Vries, the Duke said. A man of devilish cunning, my lord, Howat said. Idaho slipped the sheath knife beneath his tunic. Guard that knife, the Duke said. I understand, my lord. He patted the transceiver on his belt kit. I'll report as soon as possible. Thufir has my call code. Use battle language. He slid, spun about, and hurried after the Fremen. They heard his footsteps drumming down the corridor. A look of understanding passed between Leto and Howat. They smiled. "We've much to do, sire," Hawk said. "And they keep you from your work," Leto said. "I have the report on our advanced bases. On the advanced bases," Howat said. "Shall I give it another time, sire? Will it take long?" "Not for a briefing. It is said among the Fremen that there were more than 200 of these advanced bases built here on Arrakis during the Desert Botanical Testing Station period. All supposedly have been abandoned. But there are reports they were sealed off before being abandoned. Equipment in them?" the Duke asked. "According to reports I have from Duncan." "Where are they located?" Halleck asked. "The answer to that question," Howat said, "is invariably Leot knows. God knows." Leo murmured. "Perhaps not, sire," Howat said. "You heard the Stilgar use the name. Could he have been referring to a real person? Serving two masters?" Halleck said. "It sounds like a religious quotation. And you should know," the Duke said. Halleck smiled. This judge of the change," Leo said. "The Imperial ecologist, Keynes. Wouldn't he know where those bases are?" "Sire," Howat cautioned, "this Keynes is an Imperial servant. And he's a long way from the Emperor," Leo said. "I want those bases. They'd be loaded with materials we could salvage and use for repair of our working equipment." "Sire," Howat said, "those bases are still legally His Majesty's fief. The weather here is savage enough to destroy anything," the Duke said. "We can always blame the weather. Get this Keynes and at least find out if the bases exist. It's dangerous to commandeer them," Howat said. Duncan was clear on one thing. Those bases, or the idea of them, hold some deep significance for the Fremen. We might alienate the Fremen if we took those bases. Paul looked at the faces of the men around them, saw the intensity of the way they followed every word. They appeared deeply disturbed by his father's attitude. "Listen to him, father," all said in a low voice. "He speaks the truth." "Sire," Howat said, "those bases could give us material to repair every piece of equipment left us, yet be beyond our reach for strategic reasons. It'd be rash to move without greater knowledge. This Keynes has arbiter authority from the Imperium. We mustn't forget that, and the Fremen defer to him." "Do it gently, then," the Duke said. "I wish to know only if those bases exist." "As you will, sire." Howat sat back, lowered his eyes. "All right, then," the Duke said. "We know what we have ahead of us. Work. We've been trained for it. We've some experience in it. We know what the rewards are, and the alternatives are clear enough. You all have your assignments. He looked at Halleck. Gurney, take care of that smuggler situation first. I shall go until the rebellious that dwell in the dry land. Halleck intoned. Someday I'll catch that man without a quotation, and he'll look undressed, the Duke said. Chuckles echoed round the table, but Paul heard the effort in them. The Duke turned to Howard. Set up another command post for intelligence and communication on this floor, Fooper. When you have them ready, I'll want to see you. Howard rose, glancing around the room as though seeking support. He turned away, led the procession out the room. The others moved hurriedly, scraping their chairs on the floor, balling up in little knots of confusion. It ended up in confusion, Paul thought, staring at the backs of the last men to leave. Always before, staff had ended on an incisive air. This meeting had just seemed to trickle out, worn down by its own inadequacies, and with an argument to top it off. For the first time, Paul allowed himself to think about the real possibility of defeat, not thinking about fear because of warnings such as that of the old Reverend Mother, but facing up to it because of his own assessment of the situation. My father is desperate, he thought. Things aren't going well for us at all. And Paul recalled how the old Mentat had acted during the conference. Subtle hesitations, signs of unrest. How it was deeply troubled by something. Best you remain here the rest of the night, son, the Duke said. It'll be dawn soon anyway. I'll inform your mother. He got to his feet, slowly, stiffly. Why don't you pull a few of these chairs together and stretch out on them for some rest? I'm not very tired, sir. As you will. The Duke folded his hands behind him, began pacing up and down the length of the table. Like a caged animal, Paul thought. Are you going to discuss the traitor possibility with Howard? Honest? The Duke stopped across from the sun, spoke to the dark windows. We've discussed the possibility many times. The old woman seemed so sure of herself, Paul said. And the message, Mother, precautions have been taken, the Duke said. He looked around the room, and Paul marked the hide wildness in his father's eyes. Remain here. There are some things about the command post I want to discuss with Thufir. He turned, strode out of the room, nodding shortly to the door guards. Paul stared at the place where his father had stood. The place had been empty even before the Duke left the room. And he recalled the old woman's warning. For the father, nothing.